Hooty hoo, everyone! Welcome to this week's episode of Scenic Podcasts. I am your host, Dre, with my co-hosts here, Aaron and Raptor.
Hi.
How's everybody tonight?
I'm good. I'm ready for bed. So everybody, it's a pajama night on the Scenic Views podcast. I just forgot to tell everybody else.
Right? I would have put my pigtails in as well. It looks very...
I didn't send a memo. I was a slacker. I'm sorry.
Zach could have also participated.
Yeah, I can put pigtails in.
Oh, I really want to do that at Unconvention. I want to put pigtails and glitter in your beard.
I just found the coolest glitter at some store the other day. It was this goo in this packet, and it was like stars and moons and glitter goo, and it's going to take forever to get out of your drain. But yes, let's bring it to Unconvention for Zach's beard.
Oh, please, Zach, can we?
It was only $1. You know it's quality.
Oh, our guest might be figuring it out. We'll see.
Yay!
There it is. There it is.
Yay!
Is it coming on?
And there we
Wait
go.
for it, people. Big surprise.
All right, let me kill the sound on the rest of my devices. Hello, everybody. So thank you for bearing with me. Long story short, my Wi-Fi went down. Verizon is fucking useless, and the mobile version of BeLive is also fucking useless. So I had to go somewhere where I could get Wi-Fi, and I'm hanging out in my little guerrilla warfare spot. So hello, everybody.
Well, shit. Welcome, Zach Foster.
Are we broadcasting yet?
We are. Yes, we're live.
Oh, then I'm going to keep certain things off of the camera real quick. Okay, cool.
All right, yes. So tonight our guest is Zach Foster, longtime activist and author. He is the North American spokesperson for the Libertarians of Cuba and Venezuela.
That's what I do.
Yep. So I met Zach personally this year in NOLA at the LNC.
At the convention?
Yes, outside, in the smoking area where so many of us gather. And
Pretty good watering hole.
I'm trying
In
to
my
remember.
opinion, it would have been personally irresponsible not to be heading to like the waterfall where so many important people in the LP are gathering together in one space. I mean, you got important caucus business to discuss. You got to be at the smoking area, folks. It's the place to be.
Is where it happens.
I think a lot of important business happens there, so that's where I tend to hang out after the business is done.
I'm trying to remember, Zach. I'm pretty sure you and I met in Vegas, but I don't remember if it was at like McAfee's fundraiser or a Blaze debate or potentially a gay bar.
To the best of my knowledge,
That was fun.
to the best of my knowledge, I think we met at the National Convention in Orlando.
Did we not meet before then?
So the gay bar is what you're saying.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, I don't remember being at that particular titty bar party.
Were you not at the bar after the Blaze debate?
Oh, yeah. I was at the bar after the Blaze debate, but
I think
my
that's where
brain
we
was
met
not.
the first time. It was like a real brief introduction, but I think that's where I met you the first time.
Okay. Damn, you came out a long way for that debate.
I was out there anyway. I had actually just done Wiley Drake's show like 2 or 3 days before that. And I was there visiting family anyway, but I think I was actually introduced to you. Brett Pajunas said, come drink root beer. We're having root beer floats. Come drink root beer floats. And I was like, I don't even like root beer, but I'll go do this. And then it turns out I really like alcoholic root beer floats. Like, who knew?
What do you put in those?
Not your dad's
Root beer.
If I can keep your secrets.
It's alcoholic root beer with ice cream.
Well, what kind of booze? I'm saying, like, I have no clue.
No, it's an alcoholic root beer. Like they make not your dad and Mike's make hard root beer and hard ciders and hard sodas.
Wow, Dre, you are a terrible alcoholic. Even I knew what they were talking about.
I'm more of a beer and wine and give me a random shot once in a while kind of chick.
Oh my goodness.
I may have had a few tonight. I may have
Yeah, you
attended
guys have
happy
no
hour
idea. I mean,
earlier.
I really appreciate you guys bringing me onto the show, but you
Thought
have no
Julio
idea
and I may have
how
met
much
earlier
that my
as well.
brain and my mouth is editing right now. All these beautiful golden references to talk about alcohol, to talk about drugs.
Wow,
Oh my
I didn't
God,
think
you have
that
no
would be a
idea
conversation
how much
stopper.
I'm like an edit machine. My edit machine is gonna break here. I mean, I'm trying to like.
We talk about BDSM on here, so
Boy Scouts. I still
Right?
work with
I'm talking about taking a shot or two, and it just goes fucking silent. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, we are really bad at censoring ourselves. Zach, I think you first made me kind of aware of what was going on in Cuba and Venezuela in the movement. I guess it's been a little over a year ago, right?
Actually, it's been almost 2 years at this point.
2 years.
Yeah.
Zach, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still there.
Did we lose him?
No, I
Did
can
you see
hear
me?
him and see him. I can.
I can't. I see a black screen. Sorry.
hey, just reload then real quick, Dre.
Yeah, I'm still
Should I
here.
drop and re-add?
Yeah.
So, what was it? Not just that, like, it's the work you do, right? But what was it that really pushed you to become as active and as involved as you are? Was there like one defining moment? Because it started with Cuba.
Yeah. There definitely was one defining moment, and I would say that the moment I got involved with the Cuban libertarians is when I figured out that I'm probably not a clinical psychopath, because the chain of events that happened, literally a couple of guys in Cuba got arrested by the secret police for having the wrong book. They got sent to jail, tried in a kangaroo court. One of the guys got 2 years in prison. The other guy got sentenced to 7. They got sent to a labor prison, I believe, for having copies of Rothbard's Ethics of Liberty in Spanish. So that's what these dudes are doing a hard time for. Anyway, so one of their friends, one of the very few libertarians in Cuba at the time, and at the time, anybody who could tell you who Ludwig von Mises was in Cuba, you could probably count them on your hands. And two of the guys that knew who that was, got sent to jail. So one of the few guys that didn't get arrested got a hold of a phone in Havana, called one of his friends in Miami, who happened to also be a libertarian, authentic Misesian and all that. That guy had recently arrived in Miami as a refugee, but he doesn't speak English. He hadn't learned how to speak only mother contact with anybody in LP, Florida yet, because he just didn't know those people. So this dude, in that Cuban mindset, he just stayed isolated for a couple of weeks, looking for Spanish-speaking libertarians on the internet, and that's how he found me. I speak Spanish because my mother is Mexican. I'm Mexican-American. That's how I learned the language. And at the time, I was cruising through the Spanish language libertarian groups because this was early in 2017. The 2016 presidential election had been not that long ago. And I was phenomenally upset at a lot of idiots in our movement who I've forgiven a lot of them. A lot of them are my friends today, but they were absolutely stupid when they did this. At the very last minute, they gave into this, well, I guess we have to support Donald Trump because Hillary Clinton's going to get us in World War III nonsense. And by the way, here, just fast forward almost 2 years, Donald Trump is the president. The wall has not been built. The swamp has not been drained. All the pedophiles are still running amok. And it looks like, Venezuela might be the tinderbox that could start World War III if people don't play their cards right. So anyway, I just want to say how stupid our party members were at that point in time for deciding that Trump was the lesser of two evils. That's why I decided at the time, the hell with it, since so many American libertarians are just totally retarded. I'm going to work with libertarians in South America where people really want to make this work. I was posting in one of those groups. That's how this guy in Miami found me, asked me for help, and then he described all the stuff that was going on. For a second, honestly, I thought it might be a third world money scam, because that is a thing, especially from Cuba. And after working with Cubans for almost 2 years, I say much more confidently, third world money scams is absolutely a thing in Cuba. But this guy, this libertarian, this recently arrived refugee in Miami, was not asking me for money at all in any way, shape, or form. He kept asking me for attention. He kept asking me to get the word out. So that's what really, really caught my attention. So I got more details. Next thing you know, I asked some of the guys, some of my friends on the LP Nevada XCOM, and I kind of said, well, guys, this situation's going on. What the hell do we do about it? And then they said, I guess we could publish a resolution, get some awareness for this. But other than that, I don't know much else that we can do. So I said, all right, let's do it. They published that resolution. And LP Nevada was the first one to publish a resolution denouncing the Castro regime, identifying these guys as libertarians, and declaring solidarity with what few libertarians were on that island. And then I believe the next people to get involved, LP New Hampshire got on the bandwagon almost the next day. Some of the folks on their XCOM, they're really amazing. I don't know how else to describe them. They're freaking internet trolls. That's just what they are. They are internet trolls. There are internet trolls in the LP New Hampshire XCOM, and they happen to just be online writing the libertarian groups all day. So as soon as those internet trolls saw that we had published a resolution, then they got to work immediately. They published a resolution. Next thing you know, Christina from LP Oklahoma hits me up with some questions on the phone asking about this stuff, and she says, well, if these guys are really libertarians, and if these guys are really political prisoners, then I guess we'll do this. So LP Oklahoma was the third, and then it was like this chain of dominoes. Then we got an official resolution passed by the Libertarian Party of the United States, and that supremely pissed off the Cuban government, so they turned up the heat a lot more on what few libertarian activists we had on the islands. Now, in that amount of time, about 2 months had passed between these guys getting arrested and me getting contacted, and then all these other state LPs getting involved doing their thing, making declarations too, and then we had the National Declaration. Well, as I said, the National Declaration really pissed off Cuban state security. They started really turning up the heat on our dissidents there. In those 2 months, they had been recruiting. They'd been getting some more people involved. They'd been having some more meetings. They'd been going around doing papering in the middle of the night with images of Ubaldo and Manuel, the two guys that are in prison, denouncing the regime, saying these guys are in prison just for reading books. Is this the Cuba Libre that Castro promised us? So since so much heat was getting turned up on them and they kept getting arrested, and then they would get questioned back at the police station and they would get the shit kicked out of them, they would get a good beating, in the military, we used to say wall-to-wall counseling. Wall-to-wall counseling is something that you do to make sure that people have the correct politics in Cuba. So these guys would get arrested. They would have their own session of wall-to-wall counseling. And then 24 hours later, they would get released, bloodied up and still not intimidated. Because the heat was getting turned up, I was talking with the Cuban Mises Institute co-founder, a guy named Nelson Rodriguez Chartrand, and he was asking me, well, we might as well just come out of the closet and be libertarian in the open. The whole reason that they were trying to do a little mini Mises book club in Cuba was maybe if they just called it, Mises Club Cuba, it wouldn't get the attention of the authorities, but it still got the attention of the authorities because Cuba is still an Orwellian society. It's very different from the Orwellian society that we have here. This is very much the society of cameras, the society of third-party contractors like Booz Allen Hamilton, listening to your conversations on your cell phone on behalf of the NSA. Well, Cuba is a ghetto third world country. They don't have the budget for that. So what they do have is they'll just park a police officer on the block of a known activist. to put a little context, you know how here in the United States we have, every state, but also the federal government, you name it, any government entity has a central registry of sex offenders.
Sure.
And, every time somebody moves into a neighborhood, you know who it is. Well, in Cuba, they have registry of politically unreliable citizens. So if there's ever, something going on back in Havana, or the economy is not producing the quotas that they need, or some old fart in the Communist Party is about to kick the bucket and there could be a succession crisis, one thing they do to safeguard, the political future of the revolution is they'll whip out the map, the registry of all the known political dissidents, and they'll just send a cop to your block to make sure you don't leave your house. So if there's going to be a major holiday coming up and you haven't necessarily done anything that would warrant you being arrested, well, they won't necessarily arrest you then, but they will absolutely send a squad car to make sure that nobody goes to your house or nobody leaves your house.
Well, didn't we have in Cuba real early on in this, one of the activists there was abducted from his house, was he not?
Was not his well, all right, let me explain some context. So there was a central house that they all go to. There's a central little HQ in Havana, and that is a private home. But that private home has an empty living room that they converted into a library and a meeting space. And they've got multiple organizations. So kind of like how people here might be a member of the state and county LP, and then they'll also be a member of SFL and YAL and, Bullshit for Liberty and Liberty on the Rocks and, you name whatever social organization.
Right. We're all involved in 8,000 Liberty.
Yeah, exactly. So that, the same HQ, one day they'll be having libertarian meetings. The next day they'll be doing Mises Cuba. The next day, the Ladies in White, which is a women's dissident club, they'll be meeting there. Similar space. So everybody goes to that space, which is a private home. And these guys were leaving their home to go to that home when they got apprehended by the police. These were not regular police that patrol the neighborhoods. These are state security. State security is the political police. Okay, everything that the MAGA shitheads complain about Robert Mueller, if that was actually true, that would be Cuba state security. The difference is
political police. What exactly?
Say again?
You just said political police. What does that mean? What the fuck are political police?
Like, if your politics are wrong and you are public about it, that's a crime. Because according to Article 53 of the Cuban Constitution, people only have freedom of speech, quote, in keeping with the objectives of socialist society, ... and the means of freedom of speech can never be private property. They are the property of the state and society at large, end quote. Which means you don't fucking have freedom of speech.
What a nightmare.
That's one of the things, Dre, when so many, especially younger Americans, they have this vision, right, of socialism and of democratic socialism. And when they're talking about socialism, usually they'll point you towards some Scandinavian country, but Scandinavian countries aren't truly socialist countries, right? We've talked about this before. They are capitalist.
Yeah, no, they're just capitalist countries with high bullshit taxes.
Yeah. Right, that's what they are. When you are screaming, when we see so many young Americans, young progressive Americans screaming for socialism now, what they're really asking for, whether they're aware of it or not, is what we're seeing in Cuba and Venezuela. That's socialism.
And it's so
sad. And there's actually a couple of things I want to say in response to that. I'm glad that you said that comment. Number one, a lot of democratic socialists or social democrats here in the United States fundamentally do not know what they're talking about. They are some of the most intelligent people I have ever met. They know a lot of theory, but you could tell somebody all the theory you want about how to operate an M4 until you actually put one in their hand. They're not going to be able to disassemble and reassemble it in 2 minutes. It's just not going to happen. The thing about the social democrats is, just like Ludwig von Mises, solved that mystery for us like 90 years ago. Middle of the road leads to socialism. When you have private sector problems that you're trying to correct with a little bit more government, it just leads to more government, and then the solution seems to perpetually be more government. Now, what's hilarious is a lot of social democrats in the United States are Maduro idiots, and they really believe this stupid leftist propaganda coming from morons like Noam Chomsky. And yes, if anybody's listening, Noam Chomsky is one of the smartest people on the planet who is also an idiot. So they're going to be listening to Noam Chomsky saying Maduro is the legitimate president of Venezuela, blah, 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 overtures. Here's the part where the social democrats in the United States don't know what the hell they're talking about. The new president of Venezuela who was challenging Maduro is a social democrat. The difference is, and this is the part that the mega shitheads and all the Liberty Hangout idiots and all the fake libertarians who call themselves libertarians but are still making arguments for that wall, all of those mofos make the stupid fallacy of acting like the left is one giant monolithic united force, and it is absolutely not. The Bernie people, might like to make, hammer and sickle jokes because it makes Republicans uncomfortable and they like getting that emotional response. But democratic socialists, at the end of the day, they really believe that you can have like rich people having their rich people companies making money, and everybody just pays like an 80% tax rate and the state provides everything. They really believe in that mix of things, but they're not Marxist. Maduro, as much as he is a bullshit artist, his brand is Marxism. So in all these countries in Northern Europe, you have capitalism with a lot of regulation and high taxes. You don't have socialism. So what a lot of the democratic socialists are going for is stuff that's just middle of the road stuff, but it's not Marxism. Anyway, down there, the guy that they chose to head off the commie president is a social democrat, which as soon as I found that out, I said, well, number one, it's good that the Venezuelans finally grew a pair to challenge Maduro, because they've been trying to do it through constitutional processes for years.
Right.
And look how it's gotten them. This is why I tell the libertarians every time the Republicans try to do stuff like keep us from having ballot access in Oklahoma or kicking us off the ballot in Arizona, I always tell libertarians, stop playing nice with these people. Stop making deals with these people. They keep acting like they're your friends until they dig the knife in your back. They are never going to be your friends. They're never going to work with you. So the Venezuelans finally accepted that Maduro is, surprise, surprise, not going to be willing to talk. So they picked their guy to oppose him. They picked the guy in the biggest and most popular opposition party. The problem is, the popular opposition to the communists, the Marxist socialists in Venezuela, are the social democrats. And then I said, oh, dear God, their answer to communism is Barack Obama in Spanish. That's awesome. I'm just going to let that sink in. But yeah, Andrea, I just saw you roll those eyes all the way into the back of your head. That was beautiful.
Right?
And then I'm just going to explain real quick how they're trying to get rid of Maduro. So here's the next bit of irony. Apart from them doing a Poland 1989 all over again and picking a social democrat to fight the communists, the way that they're doing this in the Venezuelan constitution, which by the way Maduro declared dissolved, but in the Venezuelan constitution, Article 233 says that if there is no legal president-elect, then when the incumbent president's term expires, then the National Assembly, which is the Congress, the one-chamber Congress of the country, they will pick a provisional president. So that's exactly what happened. January 10th came. Maduro's 6-year term, which he got for himself in 2013, officially expired. No more bullshit. No more, prolonging it. That's when the National Assembly declared that Juan Guaido of the Popular Will Party, which is the Social Democrats, is the new president of Venezuela. And the libertarians down in Venezuela, the libertarian movement, they endorsed this. They said, we are not endorsing the provisional government. We are endorsing the National Assembly of our country, which takes our goddamn tax dollars, choosing this guy as provisional president purely for the sake of peacefully removing Maduro. So LP Nevada and LP Florida published resolutions in which we denounced Maduro for staying past his term, blah, blah, blah. We didn't recognize him. But we did something a little bit more. We did not recognize Guaido or the provisional government of Venezuela because it's still a social democrat government, dear God. Instead of recognizing them, we specifically rejected recognition for Maduro. And then we said that we are going to go to the Soy Venezuela Alliance or the I Am Venezuela Alliance for guidance on which Venezuelan leaders are worthy of public support. So instead of saying we recognize these people, we rejected a dictator, and saying while we support this, we're going to recognize these specific people. And if they're saying that you're cool, then we're not going to fight you. Now, the I Am Venezuela Alliance is the union of the classical liberal parties in Venezuela. So just imagine if the Republican Liberty Caucus was its own political party separate from the GOP. That political party is called Vente Venezuela or Come Venezuela. So that political party, a couple of small similar parties, and then some other organizations, they joined the I Am Venezuela Alliance. It was originally just a voting bloc in the National Assembly, and then at a certain point, it became a petition to get rid of Maduro, which like 8 million Venezuelans signed. And then the I Am Venezuela Alliance kind of became the shadow government of Venezuela. And they finally, some of the leading people in the I Am Venezuela Alliance, people like Assemblywoman Maria Corina Machado, who speaks English, and you can see her interviews on YouTube, finally got the other people in the National Assembly to grow a pair of balls and to actually take the destiny of their republic in their hand. So the situation that we've got today in Venezuela is that there are two states competing for control of the same country. One of them is made up of the National Assembly, which is the lawful Congress of the country, and then the Supreme Court, which is in exile in Ecuador, and basically doing fucking legal decisions by Skype. And then you've got President Guaido. Now, let me explain to you Maduro, what he's got going on. In 2017, when it looks like he was going to, when his party was going to lose some elections, he dissolved the National Assembly. And I mean, he didn't really have the authority to do it. He just issued an executive order. But I mean, he dissolved the National Assembly. It's kind of a big deal when the head of state does that. So after that, he convened another fake election to create a new Congress with only his party in it. So just imagine if, 2 years into it, you got Pelosi and the Democrats have taken the House. They're making all this talk about, you're not going to have your wall and we might impeach you. Just imagine if Donald Trump issued an executive order saying that the United States Congress is dissolved and that later this year we're going to have new elections for a MAGA Congress. And in the elections for the MAGA Congress, surprise, surprise, only like a bunch of Republicans and like 3 token members of the Constitution Party appear on the ballot in the entire country. So then imagine that he dissolves the Congress, he creates his own MAGA Congress, and then he issues another executive order saying, you know what, I'm also declaring the Constitution and we're going to write a new one and we're going to publish it later. In the meantime, I'm going to rule by decree because this is a time of emergency. We're going to make America great again. That's basically what Maduro has done over the last 2 years by dissolving the National Assembly, creating the Constituent Assembly, dissolving all political parties not represented in the Communist Constituent Assembly. And then he had that fake presidential election for himself a few months ago in which only about 2.5, maybe 3 million Venezuelans voted. This is in a country where 10 to 12 million people vote.
Now let's springboard off that. Let's imagine that Trump did exactly that, right? What would happen here? It would cause revolution. Americans would rise up. We would say no more. That's basically what's happening in Venezuela. But we have our government sitting, waiting to war hawk and intervene, like we know they shouldn't, like none of us really want them to do. But that's a very real possibility. It's a very real possibility that we're going to go down and try and throw some muscle around and force whatever regime changes we want, and realistically, the ones that are going to benefit us the most.
Hello.
You're back. He's having some difficulties there. But think about that, people. That's literally kind of the cusp that we're at. Is America going to go down and throw some weight around and force things to go the way that we want them to go, even though it's none of our fucking business?
I mean, that's a really silly question,
to that extent.
Aaron, because
right? There are a lot of things we can do if we have strong feelings about the situation in Venezuela. We can get you with Zach. Reach out to Dre or me or Raptor. We can get you with Zach. A $50 donation here goes a really long way for activists in Venezuela and Cuba. There are things that you can do, but the biggest thing you can do is lobby your senators, lobby your congressmen, and let them know that it is not okay for us to get involved, for us to militarily intervene and create another foreign entanglement in Venezuela. It's really important that people are speaking out here.
I'm bringing our guest
before
back
it gets
on.
to that. And I think Zach's coming back. There he is.
Zach, you back?
What's up? Sorry about that. I'm back.
Can you hear
So people that it is very likely, a very good, very realistic possibility that the U.S. could involve themselves in this entanglement there. And if they feel strongly against that, they need to start lobbying their senators and their congressmen, making it very clear to them that we don't want that involvement.
Yeah, so as far as U.S. intent, the government's already involved in one way, shape, or form. I mean, they've been imposing sanctions against the Maduro regime for the last couple of years, and that's come in the form of things like freezing people's bank accounts, stopping certain assets from physically arriving in the country, et cetera, et cetera. Things that would put pressure on the leader specifically. Now, there's a couple of different ways that they could play the game. I don't know the sanctions that they've been put on, because there's a lot of people inside the Venezuelan regime with specific sanctions on them as individuals. But there's two ways to do it. You can freeze an individual's foreign account so that a general no longer affords $1 million weekend and all these other people in the PSUV like to do. And then the other way is to do the Saddam Hussein North Korea route, where you just choke off food supplies and people start starving to death. I don't think they've done many of the other ones. It's actually been more the Maduro regime that has isolated them from the rest of the world, and the more dictatorial the rest of the world gets, the more they just don't want to do business with the Maduro regime. The reason why that's been so particularly devastating to Venezuela is because so many of the major industries are state-owned, or should I say state-invaded. So when they don't want to do business with the Maduro regime, they're really mean. They're just not going to do business with most of the industries in Venezuela. And then on top of that, you've got the Chinese and the Russians you've got the Russians and the Saudis paying Venezuela to produce less oil. So it's kind of a double whammy there. You've got the ineffectiveness of the communist economy, the central planning economy, creating rampant shortages in the actual refined oil being produced, and all the crude oil that's being taken out of the ground, which sucks because it's naturally one of the most oil-rich countries in the world. I don't think Texas has squat compared to Venezuela. But between communism, which is torpedo production, and then the Russians and the Saudis actually paying this regime off to produce less oil so that they can keep their prices high through artificial scarcity. Well, shoot, ordinary Venezuelans are really feeling the pinch, and you've had probably close to about 3.5 million people who have fled the country by now, which in just the last 2 years, we're getting to just the last 2 years, you've probably had about between 30 and 40% of the total amount of Cubans that have fled in 60 years. You've got, about 30 to 40% that amount coming out of Venezuela in just the last 2 years. It's
So
pretty
what do
insane.
you think? How do you
Exodus.
see it playing out? What do you think is going to happen? What's going to be the end result here?
I think the violence is going to get a before it gets better. Venezuela is already in a state of conflict. I'm not going to call it a full-scale war, but definitely a state of armed conflict. So what's going down there, you've got the clashes between protesters and the army and the police, but then you've also got all kinds of criminal violence. You've got gang wars, homicides, kidnappings, 400% spikes in criminal violence, just as that becomes one of the few ways to make some money. It's really sad. On top of the criminal violence and the gang wars, you've got these paramilitary groups that are attacking people. They're called colectivos, which means collectives. And they're these thugs on motorcycles. That's what they do. They get on motorcycles and they get pistols and knives and chains and stuff, and they go to where protesters are, or opposition people, just clearing people out, making them disperse. So the colectivo, man, they wreaked huge havoc in 2017. But they killed several people in the city of Guanare in the state of Odessa about a week ago. I got that information firsthand. And who happened for what else is going on? You've got the Colombian guerrilla armies. So you've got the FARC, which recently laid down their weapons, and they're going to pretend to be a political Colombia. But about 30 years ago, you had a splinter group form away from the FARC, which is the ELN, or the National Liberation Army. So you've got the ELN and then different little splinter groups of the FARC and other Colombian guerrillas, which, long story short, commie drug traffickers. So the ELN has invaded Venezuela, and they're in about 12 different states across the country. In some of the frontier states, the Colombian guerrillas are basically imposing kind of a blood diamonds situation, except they're conscripting Venezuelans to do forced labor and dig for gold and ore and minerals and other things. So yeah, between the army and then the military uprisings, you guys have read about that.
You were breaking out a little bit there.
So that's what
Can you rewind like 30 seconds and say that all again?
You got me now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay, so yeah, with all of that going on in the country right now, this whole smorgasbord of political or pseudo-political violence, I think it's going to get a little bit more violent before it gets better. I hate to sound like a Hoppian, but in terms of an actual military invasion, somebody has to physically remove the Colombian guerrillas, and then somebody still has to physically remove Maduro from his palace because he's not going.
It's going to get uglier, definitely uglier.
Hopefully the Venezuelans will get a little bit braver than they have been. They're culturally different from us, and that's what frustrates a lot of Americans. It frustrated me a lot at first because I kept asking these people, why won't you fight? And they said, it's because we don't have weapons. The United States have weapons. We don't have weapons. And I said, bullshit, because the Taliban has killed more than 50% of us just by burying a freaking IED in the road and then disappearing before we get there. Iraq is where insurgents were shooting us. Afghanistan is where they just blow us up and watch that shit through binoculars. Where else? The Treblinka uprising, the Jews in concentration camps found a way to do an armed uprising against the Nazis. If the Jews in concentration camp, a lot of them have been very brave. They've faced a lot of dangers. A lot of people have literally 2,000 miles to get to safety, and still get picked on by these different countries, gangs and drug cartels. It's horrible. And then a lot of people have fled to other countries for their safety because the regime was specifically threatening to kill them. And from there, they've been organizing a lot of diplomatic support. One of these people is a gentleman named Laurent Soleil, who lives in Spain now with his mom. Right now, he's doing a tour of Colombia, Peru, Chile, and some of these other countries. Laurent is a libertarian. He is also a former political prisoner. He was detained in the HQ of Venezuela's version of the CIA. the CIA and the NSA were one and the same organization. That's what Venezuela has. So he was detained in their actual HQ in Caracas. First thing that I thought was I was thinking, Cuba or kind of, rock walls and rats and medieval look. He said no, complete opposite of that. It looked like a hospital, very high tech, very Hunger Games type torture. Dosages, them shooting things in your veins, them sticking needles and pressure points where it will cause a lot of. In that place, he says they really got tortured down to a science. So, people like him, after they finally,
where was this?
After they released him, say again.
Where was this?
Venezuela.
Sorry,
No.
Lauren was a started organization to account for the 2013 protests when Maduro took power. 2013, he fled the country because the national security police or the political police, they were literally threatening to kill him. So he fled to Colombia, and the Colombian president at that time. So here's another thing that goes on. There's political problems, diplomatic problems that happen between Colombia and Venezuela all the time because the guerrilla armies cross the border. So the guerrilla armies had crossed the border and, they'd raided a police station or something like that. So the Maduro regime, they were new in power and they were, throwing their dick around and they were going to look like the king shits. And they said, hey, we're going to have a war with Colombia if you guys don't get these guys under control. So they got those guys under control. And then also to throw Maduro a bone, they threw political hostages at him. So Laurent, refugee status in Colombia, when the Colombian got him, they did not have an arrest warrant. He had not committed a crime. There was no legal or lawful valid purpose whatsoever for them to get him. This was a political kidnapping. They got him, and they literally put him on a plane to Venezuela. And as soon as he stepped off the plane, the police were there waiting for him, and he spent the next 4 years literally underground. Recently, another person was imprisoned in that same dungeon, and that guy happened to be one of the city council members of Caracas, very popular opposition members. That guy mysteriously fell to his death from National Security Headquarters, and they ruled it as a suicide. And I'm saying, okay, this guy who's been literally imprisoned in an underground dungeon committed suicide by jumping from the fourth above floor story of the National Security HQ. Okay. So anyway, the next day there was massive protests in front of that HQ, and they were kind of afraid that Venezuelans were going to do what the French did to the Bastille. So the Maduro regime released a couple of token political prisoners. It was one of them. As soon as he got released, he went to Spain, and from Spain, he continued to work against the regime that he was doing when the Colombian police went to a Cato seminar, and now he has a T-shirt with a porcupine.
So I, years ago, had the opportunity to meet a.
So what do you guys say? What do you guys want to know based on that? Because there's just so many to go from this narrative.
So like I was saying years ago, I had the opportunity to meet a Soviet dissident who was a political prisoner in Soviet Russia, Alexander Ginsburg. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I don't think you can hear us.
But this sounds very much like what interface.
I can heard you for about 5 seconds.
Oh boy. Nothing.
All right, I can hear you.
Can you hear us now? So this sounds very much.
I can hear you.
Oh no.
People that are still hanging around with us. All the people that are watching, hang around. It's rough, but what we're talking about is real people. If anybody who is suffering there through the feed, through the technical difficulties, thanks for hanging there with us. Real quick, give you guys a website while Aaron and our other co-host kind of figure some stuff out. I feel a little bit better, though, knowing that I'm not the only one with massive technical difficulties.
Oh, can
So
you hear us?
website that our viewers can go to is the website for the Mises Mombi Institute against Spain and Cuba's multiple, a little bit of the added some history's founding fathers. Mises.org, MISES-MAMBI.org. Check out our blog. We got a lot of original stories, a lot of stuff that you're not going to find from other news media sources. We've got exclusive interviews with libertarians from Cuba and Venezuela. We've got videos with insane footage of daily life in communist countries that people are not going to find anywhere else. For example, do you guys remember when that civilian airliner crashed in Havana? You guys remember seeing that in the news?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I mean, we got libertarians that live in Havana. That freaking airplane crashed in their neighborhood. They were like literally right there, to film the wreckage and stuff. Some of them participated in the ambulance trains. It was totally insane. So if you guys want to check out that website and get videos, original articles, and get the scoop at what's going on with libertarians in Cuba and Venezuela, you can go to www.mises-mambi.org. You can also look for us on Facebook. You can find the Cuban Libertarian Party on Facebook. Just search for the name Partido Libertario Cubano. Or in gringo speak, that's Partido Libertario Cubano.
And we'll have Zach send us those links so that we can get both of them up on the page too. It'll make it easier to find them. Also, if you have the means and the ability and you want to donate to help support activists in Cuba and Venezuela, you can find the information to do that on those sites as well. I strongly encourage it. It doesn't take much, right? Like $20 goes a long way in Cuba and Venezuela right now. So don't think that you can't afford to make a significant donation, because your $5 donation, your $10 donation, those are significant there.
Absolutely.
And guys, this is the same stuff that the KGB was doing in the 70s. These are not new tactics.
Go.
So here's the thing. I'm very sorry for the technical difficulties. All of us were having it. I think it's the cold, because even my network has been crap and I had to switch cameras and everything in the middle of this show. I'm very sorry, but hopefully you got something out of this. Thank you, Zach Foster, for coming on. This was a really important topic for us to cover. And we're just going to call it here. Everyone have a great week, and hopefully we can get this nonsense figured out and it won't be so cold next week. See you, everyone.